Olá a todos e obrigada pelo vosso interesse nesta sessão que vai ser dedicada aos desafios diários na sala de aula. Esta sessão vai ter duas características. Uma, primeiro momento, que vai ser falado em inglês, porque temos um convidado, o Mike, que não fala a nossa língua. E depois vamos ter um segundo momento, já em português, onde vamos debater algumas questões e alguns temas muito específicos da nossa realidade portuguesa, em conjunto com os professores Ana Paula e Rui Lima. So let's get started and welcome and introduce our guests. Ana Paula Loureiro is a teacher of the third grade of Colégio Vasco da Gama since 2007, and Rui Lima is a pedagogic director and teacher in Mont Flor School. Both Ana Paula and Rui are Microsoft Innovative Educators experts and big fans of technology in education. Mike Tolson is a member of a worldwide Microsoft education team and is focused on inclusive classrooms, learning tools, and special OneNote. So the first question for you, Mike, is if you can share and please tell us how Microsoft technology is empowering students around the world in our days.
Sure, and thanks for having me today. Microsoft Technologies in Education, we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can empower students and how we can include all students, and especially during remote learning and hybrid learning, this is even more important and it's more difficult to do because there's so many different flavors of where students are, how they're interacting, what devices they're on. And so first off, in terms of just engagement, Microsoft's our mission in education is to empower every student on the planet to achieve more. And we have a platform that we think helps do that with Microsoft Teams. And Teams for Education is really a hub that brings together student collaboration, educator collaboration, and even learning group collaboration, so for virtual learning groups of teachers. And with Teams, students are able to engage digitally. We have social and emotional learning tools built into Teams. We have the ability for students to collaborate with each other, to collaborate with the teacher. And we have lots of different apps that integrate into Teams, the engaging apps like Kahoot or Nearpod or ThingLink, and some of these apps that work with Teams. So it's really a nice hub for digital engagement and collaboration. And the other part that's important in terms of this world that we're living in is making it an inclusive platform. And I can talk a little more later in more details, but what's nice is Teams also brings together many inclusive technologies of the M365 platform to ensure that every student is brought forward. And whether it's immersive reader in Teams, whether it's our real-time captioning in Teams and focus mode for students with attention deficit disorders, and then we have tools for writing help and math help and the ability to translate lots of languages in real time. So many inclusive tools are built right into the Teams platform. So it's not just the students that are able to engage at let's say that students with disabilities sometimes are left behind. We want to make sure that all students are built into that platform and they can engage, whether it's remote learning or hybrid learning or in-person learning.
Thank you, Mike, for your comments. And now I think it's time to hear our teachers and their perspective on this topic. Anna, do you want to start?
I really agree with Mike. Microsoft technologies are really very useful for the 21st century teacher, not only because they are constantly developing, adapting to our new reality, but also because they have such pedagogical and inclusion concerns that are quite helpful for us. In fact, another thing that I find quite amazing on Microsoft technologies are that they are quite intuitive and easy to use. They are great to organize our teachers' materials, and they are great to deliver the curriculum. I can organize all my curriculum on a OneNote, class note, for example, and I can deliver curricular to to a specific class, to a specific student. And another thing that I believe that is quite important is the collaboration, not only between the teachers, but also between students. And this part is for me one of the main ideas and one of the main focus of Teams and all the Microsoft technologies. What about you, Rui? What do you think?
Well, my perspective is always from the teacher's perspective, and I always feel that the tool is great, but it's more important what you do with the tool. As a teacher, I want to have good tools to work with my students, but it's what I do with the tools that is important. However, of course, when we have Teams or OneNote, I'm a huge fan of OneNote since before we had the Office 365. I used to use with my students in my personal account with all the curriculum inside OneNote. So yeah, great, great, Mike. And now we have Teams, and we can integrate with the OneNote integrated is great because the students can access all the information on Teams and on OneNote. However, in our school, we work a lot in projects. So having a tool as Teams to work in projects is very important. I work with the 8 and 9 years old students now, but they started using Teams when they were 7 years old. And it was great to have different teams working at the same time. And now we have breakout rooms and we can do even more things with it. But before, I used to make meetings with different groups, and one of the students sharing the screen and the others adding information on the work. So it's great to have a tool when you work in a proper way to develop those skills, because sometimes we have the tools, but if we keep only giving lessons, like giving lectures with a video conference, this is not very innovative. So we must think in the tool, but how we use the tool. I don't know if Mike agrees with me.
Yeah, no, that's great. You mentioned breakout rooms that we just rolled that out recently, and that's been a top request from educators. And one of the things actually with breakout rooms that I like to talk about, kind of back to inclusion, is because Teams meetings have all these inclusive technologies built in that I was talking about before, and they have whiteboards as well. They have all those things in a meeting. When you break out into breakout rooms, each of those little rooms has all the same inclusive technologies. So focus mode, or the ability to do captioning, or the ability to do together mode, which actually helps reduce brain fatigue. There's science behind together mode, if you've seen that. And the reason is that if you have all the 7 squares, 7 by 7 squares, people actually shift around depending on whose camera's on and off. And your brain has to sort of recalculate constantly. And that's why it can be exhausting to be on meetings like this, for example, where you have lots of squares. But with together mode, the actual person's head is always in the same spot. And so there's actually a lot of brain science and brain scanning that the team's researchers did. And it shows actually a much relaxed state of the brain because you're not always having to repivot where people are. And so if you think about that from a student perspective, maybe it's students with attention deficit disorder or students with visual processing challenges, that can be really overwhelming. And so together mode is really nice for that. And it works in breakout rooms as well as a regular meeting. And in terms of engagement that you were talking about earlier, another thing that we're really excited about, and it's getting a very big upgrade, it's actually rolled out right now, is something called Insights in Teams. And Insights will allow the teacher, you install an app in your classroom, and it's called Insights, and it will actually look across everything happening in your class for engagement. So it can tell, for example, even who are in meetings or who are not in meetings, or who are working on assignments and when do they complete their assignments, or the digital activity of who is accessing different files and when, and you can really have a sense of what's happening in your classroom. But the newer version of Insights will start surfacing patterns. It might say, oh, this person, it looks like, is always doing a bunch of work the day before the assignments due. And these people are sort of working at a more regular pace. Or this student here has been missing a bunch of assignments in the last 2 weeks and will notify the teacher. So we start to surface digital engagement as well as digital assignment activity to the educator. And instead of just looking at charts and dashboards, we actually surface useful nuggets of information that are actionable back to the teacher. And so that's something that we think, even when the pandemic ends, which is hopefully very soon, post-pandemic, that's still useful to be able to see the digital activity that's happening in your class. And so that is something that is rolled out right now, and it's going to be improved in the near future. We also are going to be coming out with, in probably the next few weeks, something that we call leader insights. That takes the data from some of the different classrooms, and it will allow school leaders to roll that information up more broadly and to see patterns across maybe the school or the school system. And so that's a new component that's called leader insights, and that's coming out very soon, but it's a follow-on to the main class insights. So we're excited about that in terms of teachers being able to see the digital engagement that's happening in their class. And so and Anne, I'm curious, what do you do in your classroom in terms of digital engagement, fun ways to keep the kids engaged?
In my classroom, I am always using Teams. Sites is one of the apps that I usually adapt at the beginning of the school year, because I really need to know what the students are doing, and they also need to do that. They also need to understand what they are missing. So usually in my classes, I also show the students the insights. All my students use the tablets every day. So our class starts with a Teams announcement, and that's how I start the class. It's where everything happens. And I have to tell you that the breakout rooms have been useful not only personally, but also when I have some students at home, because it happens sometimes that I need to have students at home because they are with problems, with health problems, and we are using the breakout rooms to promote the collaborative work. This collaborative work is quite important, and before breakout rooms, we used to use the Teams channel, the general channel, to do several meetings at the same time. But now with the breakout rooms, it's everything quite different. So everything in my class happens on Teams and using the OneNote. OneNote, as most of the people that know me already know that I'm a number one fan of OneNote. I believe it's the most powerful education tool that a teacher can use for several reasons.
Agree.
Sorry?
Oh, I just said I agree.
Oh, it's my favorite educational tool, exactly because it can be the place where I deliver my curriculum, but it's also the place where I collaborate with my students and with other teachers. And I think that OneNote, when it's also used inside the Teams, is the most powerful tool that we can use. And we can have a different notebook for each classroom and even for each student, because it can adapt to that student in particular, that classroom in particular. And we can say that at the end of the year, each student has his own notebook, and it is how do you say, a portfolio that is going to build during the school year. And in our case, I teach students from the 7th to the 9th grade, and they all use the OneNote on the 9th grade, but they are also going to use and to see the things, especially in the content library, that they use on the 7th grade. So they are building knowledge, and they are also collaborating between them and with us, and that's really important for me and for my students, I believe. What do you think, Rui?
From my perspective, I think to engage the students, it's always a matter of not going back in time. And during this pandemic, we saw lots of teachers in schools who were implementing innovative approaches. When they went home, they went back in time, and suddenly in the classrooms they had active learning with their students using Teams, but all using other approaches without technology, with technology as well. But when they went home for 10 years ago, because they only gave lessons through a meeting, a video conference, and after the meeting they sent forms for the students to answer. This is not very different from what we had 20 years ago, 30 years ago. The teacher speaks for the students, and after that he makes a test for the students if they were paying attention. So that's not my perspective of engaging the students, because I feel that teaching, it's, as Mike was saying, it's a matter of emotions. Teaching is emotion, teaching is engagement, it's commitment with the learning process, and we can only do that when we make students engage with the learning process. And that's why Teams is so good, because we can share with students via OneNote, or via the files tab, or via other the conversation with the students. We can share with them resources. They can explore resources, and most important, they can create resources. And this is something I always say. We cannot promote creativity if we don't challenge students to create things. And that's the good thing about using these platforms. With these platforms, we can challenge students to create products, and at the end, they can share their products and proud of what they did with the others. And it's always great to see when they publish a work they've done on Teams with the others. They see comments from the other students. They see the others the others said good things about their work, and I'm always proud when the students are proud of their own work. And this is something I always feel that Teams allows, is to make students be engaged, but to connect, emotional connect with the learning process. And that's our main concern. From every teacher wants the students to be committed with the learning process, and this is in an emotional situation. I don't know. I always like to listen what Mike has to say, because he has lots of things to say to us about all these things. So I'm curious about what Mike thinks.
Oh yeah, I think everything you said is something I definitely agree with, and we're always trying to figure out new ways to give students and educators tools to, whether it's creativity, whether it's collaboration, whether it's inclusion. We're definitely always thinking forward on how we can improve what we have and add new capabilities. And on that front, I would say, in the next coming months, and I'm not going to share anything too secretive, but I would say pay attention. We're going to have a bunch of big announcements for Teams, some big announcements for our inclusive technologies, and then some new OneNote announcements as well. And some of the things will be quite exciting, I would say. And I'm working on some of them personally, and some of my colleagues are also working on those. And so, stay abreast in terms of our announcements. We'll have blogs out. We have, if you're on Twitter, I put out lots of tweets about our new and upcoming releases. And then also, actually, even the other thing that I personally did during the lockdown originally in March and April, when the pandemic started, I'd never really used YouTube before as a person making videos, but I started creating videos to help teachers learn how to use our technologies and little quick tips and how to get up and running. And so that's been pretty fun. And I'll continue to put out helpful tips and videos and how-tos for these new capabilities, because we know that teachers don't have a lot of time in their day, especially during these times. And so trying to make it really simple and straightforward on how to get up and running and use some of these tools, that's something that we're also trying to focus on. And so hopefully that'll be helpful in the coming year.
It also happened to me. I have never made a video for YouTube, but during the the lockdown, sorry, I've also created a YouTube channel with some videos to share with our Portuguese teachers. Some of them about OneNote, Teams, and so on, because people were quite available to learn. That's what I felt. They wanted to learn more things about especially the Teams, right? And they are also waking up for OneNote.
Yeah,
I had the same, but not me, with my wife. She's a teacher, a kindergarten teacher, and she's afraid of technology. It's funny because when she uses technology, everything stops working. So before this lockdown, she didn't like technology, didn't want to use technology, and now she's a YouTuber. So I'm very proud of her. But it's always good when we learn with all this problem we have.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, it sounds like we're going to have Adelaide is going to be doing. We're going to pass it over to Adelaide, and she's going to be giving the Portuguese perspective. I speak in English only, unfortunately. I can't speak Portuguese, so we'll turn it over to Adelaide.
So, Mike, thank you once again for your time and all the best for you. Bom, e agora estamos de regresso já em português, com os nossos convidados, a professora Ana Paula e Rui Lima, onde vamos dar um rápido olhar para duas realidades em Portugal muito concretas. A primeira, que resultou da enorme experiência e dedicação que foi recolhida pelos professores durante o tempo da pandemia ou do confinamento e agora ainda neste primeiro período com a utilização das tecnologias. Todos fizeram um grande esforço para aprender mais, para aprenderem a utilizar a tecnologia no seu dia-a-dia, mas o que ouvimos e o que eu ouvi também de muitos professores é que se sentem exaustos e que, no fundo, a tecnologia lhes trouxe mais trabalho. E a pergunta para cada um de vós é esta: será que é mesmo verdade que a tecnologia dá mais trabalho aos professores? Ana Paula.
Ora bem, eu julgo que numa fase inicial, quando pegamos numa determinada ferramenta, obviamente que nos vai dar um pouco mais de trabalho a conseguir dominar e pensar o que é que eu, em termos pedagógicos, vou fazer com esta ferramenta, não é? Nós queremos sempre alavancar a tecnologia para a aprendizagem concretamente. E realmente, numa fase inicial, quando o professor está a pegar numa ferramenta pela primeira vez, obviamente que vai dar trabalho. Mas eu julgo que esse trabalho, numa fase posterior, vai compensar, até porque há ferramentas que depois se dominam e há determinadas características que são comuns a várias ferramentas. E, portanto, a partir do momento que se domina determinada ferramenta, consegue-se dominar outras. E depois há a parte do conseguirmos reutilizar determinadas coisas que nós já temos construídas e que podemos utilizar, reinventar, etc. Portanto, eu julgo que será sempre numa fase inicial mais trabalhoso, mas que depois compensará com toda a certeza, porque em termos de concretização será muito mais prático realizar determinadas atividades com os alunos.
Muito obrigada. É a sua opinião, Rui?
Bem, a minha opinião não diverge muito da opinião da Ana Paula, como é evidente. Em todo o caso, eu creio que mais importante do que pensarmos no trabalho que vamos ter com a utilização da tecnologia e com uma utilização diferente da tecnologia em contexto pedagógico, o que é mais importante é nós vermos o que é que podemos retirar de positivo com a utilização da tecnologia. Ao longo deste período de confinamento e ao longo deste primeiro período, pudemos perceber que os professores tiveram de aprender muito rapidamente a utilizar as tecnologias, mas também muito rapidamente perceberam, se por um lado dava mais trabalho, também tinham alunos motivados, tinham os alunos despertos para outro tipo de atividades, onde é utilizada a tecnologia, e é isso que devemos refletir, quais são os benefícios que a tecnologia nos traz e de que forma é que a utilização da tecnologia vai proporcionar aos alunos uma maior motivação e, consequentemente, uma maior motivação também para os professores. Creio que quando temos alunos mais motivados, os professores também vão estar mais motivados e, consequentemente, até vão sentir-se um bocadinho melhor por terem um bocadinho mais de trabalho, mas por conseguirem retirar mais do processo de aprendizagem.
É, no fundo, conseguirem atingir aquilo que é o grande objetivo, que é, de facto, os alunos mais motivados e por isso mesmo com mais aprendizagens. Nós estamos hoje, como sabem, a passar um momento único em Portugal em termos de transformação, de transição digital, também ela aplicada na educação. Portanto, há um programa a correr com grandes investimentos em tecnologia e já tivemos esses investimentos no passado e, de alguma forma, sentimos que não foi possível cumprir a ambição que esses projetos tiveram no passado. Estamos a lembrar-nos do Magalhães, do projeto da escola, das salas TIC, tudo investimentos que foram feitos a pensar na transformação da educação. E, portanto, agora que se calhar sentimos que é uma grande oportunidade, acham que estão reunidas estas condições para que haja uma espécie de clique para que se faça essa transformação, se calhar nos professores, nas lideranças, no coletivo? O que é que sentem a esse nível?
Eu creio que esse clique deverá passar transversalmente por todos os atores educativos, por parte dos alunos, das lideranças, as lideranças intermédias e as lideranças mais superiores também, como é evidente, mas essencialmente é importante este clique fazer-se na sociedade, de uma forma geral, nos pais, muito importante também, e percebermos que a escola tem forçosamente que mudar o paradigma, e nesse paradigma onde o aluno tem um papel diferente, onde o professor tem um papel diferente, a tecnologia também tem que estar bastante presente. E eu creio que é esta mudança que é essencial, é uma mudança de mentalidade em que o aluno seja mais ativo no processo de aprendizagem, em que o professor também não passe a ser passivo no processo de aprendizagem, não baralhar as coisas. Que é essencial é desafiarmos numa altura em que tanto desafiamos os nossos alunos a adquirirem as chamadas competências para o século XXI, apesar de já estarmos há 20 anos no século XXI, o importante é nós desafiarmos os alunos a serem criativos, a revelarem espírito crítico, a comunicarem uns com os outros, a colaborarem, a mostrarem capacidades de liderança, e tudo isso só é possível se desafiarmos os alunos a serem mais ativos e o professor proporcionar ferramentas aos alunos que lhes permitam adquirir essas competências. Eu creio que o clique passa muito por aí, é vermos como é o papel da escola, o papel dos professores e, como é evidente, o papel dos alunos, que tem que se mudar se queremos outro tipo de aquisição de competências. Okay?
Muito obrigada. Ana Paula, rapidamente para terminarmos, a sua opinião.
Concordo com tudo o que o Rui acabou de dizer, acrescento realmente que a dimensão humana e da formação de professores são essenciais. Portanto, por um lado, pensarmos que quem vai estar em sala de aula a pôr em prática este plano de transição digital vai ter de estar muito atento ao que está a acontecer, vai ter de levar para a sala de aula aquilo que aprende em termos de formação e sublinho mais uma vez que a formação de professores é essencial. Passamos agora por um momento de formação de formadores de professores que entrarão no terreno nas próximas semanas e com certeza que vamos ter muita formação que deverá depois ser concretizada em termos de sala de aula. Portanto, eu acho que isso é essencial, levarmos os professores a concretizar em termos práticos aquilo que aprendem em termos de formação. Obviamente que a dimensão humana é essencial, portanto, o professor que está em sala de aula, o aluno, como o Rui falou há pouco, os pais, levar os pais à escola é também muito importante para perceberem realmente o que é que está a acontecer, para estarem do nosso lado, para conseguirem perceber qual é que é a transição que estamos a fazer neste momento e que é uma transição essencial. Numa sociedade digital, temos também uma escola digital que corresponde às necessidades de uma escola do século XXI, como diz o Rui, já estamos nela há 20 anos, não é? Mas que realmente eu julgo que esta capacitação poderá ter a sua parte positiva e que poderá ser uma grande transição, desde que também haja um acompanhamento devido em termos de redes, em termos de máquinas, etc.
Muito obrigada, Ana Paula, muito obrigada, Rui. Este, de facto, é um puzzle, a transformação digital na educação é um puzzle com muitas peças e todos têm que contribuir. Chegamos ao fim desta sessão, que foi dedicada ao tema dos desafios diários na sala de aula. Muito obrigada, Ana Paula, muito obrigada, Rui, muito obrigada a todos que se interessaram por esta sessão.
Obrigada.